Okay, so today we're doing another Let's Discuss video. I did these kind of regularly and then I stopped, and now I'm doing one. So basically the point of these videos is just for me to chat a little bit about tropes that I like, why I like them, things that I enjoy. I don't know, they're just chit-chat videos, really. This time I want to chat about why we get so attached to fictional characters and, I don't know, go from there. But before we get into it, a shout out to today's sponsor, Book of the Month. So Book of the Month is a subscription that helps people to discover the best new release, early release, and debut adult fiction books. They offer 5 new release books every month, and members get to pick one to be shipped to their home, or if they want more, in addition to one of their featured boxes, members can add up to 2 featured books, trending books, or previous books as add-ons to their monthly purchase. And members can skip a month anytime they want with no penalty. So for the August books, we have Damnation Spring, a moving portrait of a family struggling to make ends meet in a logging town, divided over the fate of its forest. The Inheritance of Orchidia Divina. At their matriarch's funeral, the Montoyas receive a truly magical inheritance, but with great riches come great enemies. The Heart Principle. After a failed one-night stand, or 2, Anna's son realizes she might have found something rare. True love. Not a happy family. This twisted domestic suspense of a wealthy family unraveling after their parents are murdered. Once There Were Wolves. A woman journeys to Scotland, determined to save the wilderness, but tragedy bites just as her new life starts to settle. So head over to bookofthemonth.com to get your first books, and your first month is only $9.99 with the code, which will be linked in the description of this video. So fictional characters and fictional stories as a whole, some of us, me, get way too attached, ridiculously attached to stories and to characters that are ultimately not real. Why? And I don't know, I just want to discuss it a little bit more. I decided I wanted to talk about this last night. I've thought about it a little bit this morning. It's gonna be pretty just chit-chatty, not well structured. But there is this thing called a book hangover that we experience, or at least that I experience, when it's a story that really relates to me, when it's characters that I've really fallen for, when the story is exploring themes that I really relate to, that when I close the book, when I read the last page and it's over, I feel a sadness that there's not more story for me to have, that there's not more time that I get with these characters because they have become such a part of my world. So why do we get this attached? Why do we have such an intense relation to fiction, to something that we are very aware is not real? Well, there are a couple of reasons, at least for me, that it comes up. One, sometimes I just really relate to the characters' personal struggles or to what sometimes I really relate to the character themselves or the things that they're going through. Skyward by Brandon Sanderson was the single most YA novel where I saw myself as a YA, as a teen, as someone of this age group. The way Spencer was so, I don't know, she puffed herself up. She was a pufferfish. She wanted so badly to look tough and to be, she put up walls and she wanted, the way she dealt with the pain that she experienced by projecting herself as somebody not to mess with, even though inside she was just hurting, looked so much like the way I was as a teen, working through some really tough stuff. And the way I handled it was by closing myself off, putting up walls, and trying to look real tough. And I just saw myself so much in her that any flaws that may be in this book, I didn't care about. This book meant so much to me for the sake of seeing myself so much in it. Pet Sematary. That's a weird one to see yourself in. Pet Sematary is a horror book, but really, horror is used as a tool to explore grief. And my friend Daniel sent this book to me after I told him that my grandpa had recently passed away, someone I was very close with, and I was trying to work out my grief, and I couldn't really work it out very well. I was reading nonfiction books about it, I was reading fiction books about it, I was trying to process it. I really couldn't get through it. And he sent me this, and this was the single best book to help me process my grief. This is a book that a lot of people have come back after I've so highly recommended it, and they haven't liked it. They call it boring, they think that it's predictable, and I think that both of those complaints are totally reasonable. But I will never stop loving this book. This book, I can't shift the way I see it because it was something that was really significant to me that actually helped me through real life stuff because of the themes that it was exploring. Other times we see characters that we look up to in stories. We may see a character face a situation that we don't know how we would handle in their situation, or we know very well how we would handle in the situation. And seeing a character that we have related to, that we've bonded with, that we trust and that we care about, seeing them respond to a situation in a way that's very mature, that's very self-sacrificial, or that's very selfish and choosing to honor themselves over constantly giving of themselves, whatever the situation may be, we see sometimes a future in a character. We see characteristics in a character that we admire and that we ourselves would like to be more like. Sometimes we get to explore the world through a character. It doesn't have to be real life scenarios. Sometimes we're just in a fantasy world with a character. I remember as a teenager, The Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini was the book. They were the books that I read and reread and reread and reread so many times just because I was putting myself in Aragon's position of being a dragon rider. I wanted to ride dragons too. I wanted to find a mysterious egg in the forest and then hide my dragon from my caretaker parental figure. I had parents, he had a granddad. It didn't matter. And I wanted to go off on adventures on a flying dragon learning to fight with swords. I wanted that, and the story didn't really do anything for me on a deep level like these two did. It was just a really cool adventure that I really liked having. Sometimes we see values in characters that we ourselves value strongly, and we see it play out in a way that we really relate to and appreciate. In the Gentleman Bastard series, which I'm doing read along for, by the way, check it out. There's a video. In the Gentleman Bastard series, friendship and deep, loyal, unwavering relationships is something that I really strongly value and that I want in my life and have in my life and love. And seeing that played out in a series that I otherwise find completely hilarious and fun and exciting made me attach the story in a really significant way. Again, loyalty, self-sacrificial love, unwavering trust and love in friendships, again, is something that I really relate to. I latched on to One Piece like you wouldn't believe. You would believe it. I make a lot of One Piece videos now. Sometimes we relate to stories because we see ourselves in them. Sometimes we relate to stories because we see a piece of ourselves or a picture of what we would like to someday be more like. Sometimes it's because we see something that's valuable to us reflected back to us and that is meaningful to us. And sometimes it's just about going on an adventure. And a lot of times the reason that I relate to stories has nothing to do with relatability. Sometimes I don't see myself in a story at all. I can't relate to the struggles at all, but sometimes I read a story that shows a perspective or a person or a life circumstance that I can't relate to, that I have never and will never experience. But it helps me to see the world through another person's eyes. It helps me to see the world a little bit differently. It helps me to understand another perspective a little bit better. I come away from the book not feeling seen or understood, but rather someone else was seen and understood through that story, and I've come away learning and seeing the world through a little bit wider lens. And that too helps me to relate to stories and feel defensive over stories on a totally different level. If characters, if plots, if worlds and themes being discussed in a story, if these things are well developed and nuanced enough, then we the reader, or at least I, the reader, will find find myself crying alongside with characters when they're going through different obstacles or traumas in the story, as if we ourselves are experiencing it right next to them. I feel like I'm going on the adventure too. I feel like I know these characters and like I've stepped into this world. And that's a big reason why I love portal fantasy, doorway fantasy, Narnia, the Wayward Children series, stuff like that. Because when I open a book that I really, really relate to, that I fall in love with, I feel like I've stepped through a portal. I feel like I'm there. And I think that all of these things that I just discussed, and probably a lot more, is a lot of times why we end up with kind of toxic fans to any fandom. Sometimes there are stories that we relate to so hard that we feel like has shaped us and understood us and helped us to understand the world a little bit better. Books that are so significant to us that they feel real to us. They feel like they've become a part of who we are, become a part of our identities. And sometimes, because reading is subjective and there is not one way to see a story or a character, especially a well-written story where we're allowed to interpret a lot of things ourselves and we're allowed to have our own opinions of our characters, because authors haven't tried to force opinions upon us about characters. That's a whole nother video topic. But a really well-written and nuanced story, different readers are going to come away with it with different experiences. And sometimes when a story is really meaningful to us and has become a big part of the way we see the world or the way we see ourselves, sometimes when somebody comes away from a story with a totally different experience, with a totally different opinion on characters, on the world, or just a different feeling for the book at the end of it, sometimes we feel like we have to defend the story, sometimes aggressively. Now, don't get me wrong, Gentlemen Bastards, favorite series of all time. This is a story that's pretty derisive. It's a story that a lot of people have a lot of different feelings on. I have hyped this story so much on my channel in the 5 years that I've had a channel. Well, I haven't. I read it while it doesn't matter. For years, I have hyped this story so hard, and I get a lot of feedback on that. I have had a lot of people fall in love with the story just as hard as I have. And I've had a lot of people come back to me and say, I hated this. I think that it was constructed poorly. I have all these technical criticisms. I don't think the characters are all that great. I don't think the friendship is all that great. And I understand that hurts a little bit. I mean, people come back to me all the time to give me feedback on how they felt about my favorite stories. I'm used to it at this point, and I like to think that the majority of us can respond to that sort of thing with, that makes sense. Different people interpret stories differently. It doesn't change what this story has been to me. It doesn't change the significance of this story to me. That's a posture I try to have when people come back to me and say, I hated Peter Pan, which I think is really valid. It's definitely a niche story that I just have connected with. And somebody coming back and saying, I hated Peter Pan because of this, 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 and this, it does not detract from my love for Peter Pan and from the meaning that it holds for me. Peter Pan is another story where there is a specific character in the story that I see a very specific part of myself reflected back to me in the purest way. And it's a story that holds so much meaning to me. And when somebody comes back and says, 1 star, I hated it, it does not detract from the meaning that it holds for me. But again, that's a whole nother topic to discuss some other time. Stories have the power to unite people. Used to be we would have people lining up outside of a bookstore the night before to get the latest Harry Potter release. People would dress up to go to movie theaters when we got the next movie of some really iconic popular series that has infiltrated our entire society. We have conferences and cons completely around a series that is entirely fictional. And a lot of people will come together for these major events and meet people there that become lifelong friends. I myself, a lot of my closest friends are people that I've met online. People that are either other content creators, Daniel, who I mentioned earlier in this video and who that Voxer message probably was from. I met online. I met because we both have a channel and we've met in life a couple of times now, talk regularly. He's one of my closest friends. I also have a lot of friends that I've met through my Discord, through my Patreon, that I talk to on a regular basis, and from there have moved into DMs and then moved to phone calls and sometimes have moved to meetups. People that I've shared my life story with, people that I know on a really personal level, people that I go running to when I'm having a really hard day and just need to talk. These are people that I've met through our love of stories. Stories have the power to help us to see the world differently. They have the power to help us to see ourselves differently. And they have the power to unite us and make really deep and meaningful friendships. Stories are awesome, and I appreciate so much that authors put so much of themselves into stories so that we, the readers, can get so much out of them. There's literally no point to this video. I don't have a satisfying conclusion except to say that I just kind of wanted to deconstruct why we get so intense about books and characters and why we love them so much. And I guess also just appreciate that a piece of media has the ability to be so significant to us. I love that. I think that's really cool. Anyway, I'd love to continue chatting with you about this in the comments. Are there things that I didn't cover that also make you really attached to a story that you would also like to talk about? Are there thoughts that I had in this video that you'd like to expand on? I'd love to keep chatting with you guys about it. I post videos every Tuesday through Friday. I'll see you again soon.